there and welcome back to another Pixar video. And today I want to talk a little bit about a film that I feel like's fallen out of the public eye. Monsters, Inc. And you might be a bit shocked at that statement. I mean, surely he's not going to be saying this film's underrated. Well, no, it's not underrated, and it did very well for its time. In terms of its box office, it grossed $577 million off a budget of $115 million. It had a critical score of 96% on Rotten Tomatoes from 200 reviews, and an audience score of 90% from over 250,000 reviews. And yeah, that's a pretty consistently high score. I mean, often there's a little bit of disparity between some of these scores, but here the critics and the masses are in agreement. This film's awesome. And on top of that, it even got nominated for Best Animated Picture. And yeah, it lost to Shrek, which, fair enough, Shrek's a true classic. There's no shame in losing to that. And I honestly think it could have gone either way. It also won Best Original Song, got nominated for Best Original Score and Best Sound Editing, and so from the get-go, it seemed like there was a lot of prestige surrounding the film. Hell, it even spawned a sequel. Well, a prequel technically. Right at the start of Pixar's sequels era during the 2010s. So it's pretty clear to say that Monsters, Inc. is truly one of Pixar's most successful films, and was the first film in Pixar's epic run of the 2000s. A run that included classics like Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Up. An era where they went from that cool new studio that makes 3D animated films in the late 90s to a titan that was pummeling Disney into the dirt year after year, winning Oscars and raking in the box office earnings. And all the while, Disney, who dominated that position during the 90s, really started to struggle. And it all started with Monsters, Inc. And it's really not hard to see why. The film's just genuinely good. In terms of the story, the film tells the tale of Mike and Sully, two friends who work together at the Scare Factory in the city of Monstropolis, where they sneak into children's rooms to scare them and harvest their fear to serve as power. In their duo, Sully's the scarer and Mike's his assistant, and they are the A-listers, the star team. Until a little girl whom they named Boo is brought back to their monster world by mistake. Quickly becoming enamored with her and treating her like his own child, Sully vows to protect her, and the pair quickly learn that laughter is able to generate far more energy than screams. And this in turn makes Sully realise that their society's been doing things wrong this entire time, that they need to change their ways. Of course, these changes aren't always treated as the revolutionary findings that he thought they'd be, and the pair find themselves betrayed and banished to the human world by their boss, Mr. Waternoose. They then work together to return to the human world and are able to save Boo and defeat Waternoose all at the same time, with their longtime rival Randall banished to the human world and probably murdered by hillbillies who think he's an alligator. And so, by the end of the film, times have changed. Instead of Sully being the champion scarer, he's now an assistant to Mike, who's a champion comedian. And Monsters, Inc. dedicates itself to making children happy, to making them laugh, and thereby becoming a more successful and wholesome business. With Sully even able to visit Boo in the human world from time to time. That's a wholesome ending. You know what, I really got to get around to watching it again soon. Such a classic. But yeah, anyway, it's a great story, a really tight script, it's funny and heartwarming, at times heartbreaking, and it's the kind of plot that I think really encapsulates Pixar's whole narrative vibe. Films that are designed to enthrall and enrapture children, but that also have a lot to offer for older audiences. It's well structured, and there's no real lulls in the film. It doesn't linger or slow down too much. And so you leave the experience feeling very satisfied. The characters, they're exciting and engaging. They have fully fleshed out personalities which tie into their role in the plot. And I don't think there's a single character in the film that doesn't have some element of their personality that makes them stand out. And this goes down to the smallest side characters with only a handful of lines. The film works hard at its character development and developing these character identities. The world that the film creates is visually appealing. The characters are colourful and exciting and diverse. No characters look derivative, and no characters look the same. They're all so visually distinct, a living rainbow on screen. And I think by having them all seem so different, the film actually manages to make a lot of the different characters become far more memorable. Beyond characters like Sully and Mike and Randall, because, as the main protagonist and the main antagonist, it would be a bit of a given that the audience should be expected to know who they are. But even minor characters who would have otherwise faded heavily into the background are made more memorable simply through their design, simply through visuals, as they create this living, breathing world filled with so much possibility. And beyond that, the animation quality, Pixar's always been a game changer. Every film they make improves on the last in some way, but this was a massive step up. I mean, look at Sully's fur. Not bad at all for 2001. It's insane how good this looks. I mean, look at the individual strands of fur. And on top of that, a great soundtrack with a truly iconic song. And like I said, they got some Oscar nominations and wins from this soundtrack, so Monsters Inc. critically acclaimed by professionals and audiences alike, a box office triumph, and did well at awards shows come awards season. A true classic by any means, and one that you would assume would have stood the test of time. And indeed, it does still hold up. It's still beloved, and is of high quality. But then why the hell has it seemingly faded away? Why is it that when people reflect on the great Pixar classics, more and more it seems like Monsters Inc. is shuffled off to the side and, well, not forgotten about, but ignored until attention is actually brought to it. And after that, that's when it gets all the attention and praise again, before being, quietly shuffled off to the side again. And I just don't understand why this is the case. Is it simply a case of the shiniest toy getting the most attention? And since Monsters Inc. is older and less beautiful, it gets less of that esteem? Not really sure about that hypothesis, honestly. After all, there are a number of other films from that era, or before, that are still looked back on quite regularly with a lot of love, being described as all-time greats. Nemo, Incredibles, Toy Story, Toy Story 2. What I think is more likely is it simply doesn't have the same follow-up, the same legacy. I mean, look at the big franchise players in Pixar's library. A lot of them won the Oscar, and whilst that might not seem like a big deal at the time, I think it does lend a lot of prestige when the audience is looking back years and years later. Monsters Inc. unfortunately missed out on that. And then its subsequent film, Monsters University, yeah, it was good and it did well at the box office and it did all the things it needed to, but it was also kind of forgettable, especially when compared to some of the other sequels coming out during that era. Toy Story 3, Finding Dory, Incredibles 2, billion-dollar grosses, box office smashes, Oscar winners, critical acclaim. But here, it just didn't have that same feeling of prestige. And then on top of that, it came out right before the huge Pixar boom. Finding Nemo is the one that kicked things up a gear. And so I feel like Monsters Inc. did get left in the dust a little bit because of that. And it's a shame, because ultimately, it's a great film. It's one of Pixar's true classics, although I'll admit that's a very, very long list for how old the studio is. I mean, they've had very, very few misses. But regardless, I still think it deserves a little bit more love. And so, yeah, I think I'll just call this video here. That's the end of the video. And I would like to remind you that these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of Monsters Inc.? Do you think it's been unfairly forgotten a little bit? Or am I completely off base? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.